Hey, thanks for coming. I'm the GRC guy. Let's get started.
Have you ever thought about how many risks you took in your life? How many of them were close calls? Have you ever jumped off an airplane? Or how about distract yourself while driving? Have you ever gone on a long hike? How about climb a mountain without no gear? Risks are everywhere, and that is the subject of today's topic. For all of human history and the remainder of our existence, our survival has been based on successful risks taken. However, at one point in human history, our survival was actually nearly at stake if it wasn't for one risk decision that saved us all. In September 26, 1983, Soviet Lieutenant Colonel
Stanislav
Petrov was stationed at a command center responsible for a nuclear missile system. There, the system reported on an inbound of 5 missiles coming in from the United States. Luckily for us, Stanislav made the decision to call it a false positive and ultimately saving us from a nuclear destruction. Now, mind you, this was at the height of the Cold War, where tensions between the United States and the Soviet USSR were really high. So a possibility of a nuclear war was actually there. Check out movies related to this type of scenario. There's a lot of movies in the 80s and even earlier that kind of captured this looming threat. Even movies in the 90s. One that I can think of is K-19, The Widowmaker, with Harrison Ford. From the time you wake up, your whole day is full of risk decisions, whether you like it or not. Should I drink coffee today? Will that affect my performance and my mood? How will I get to work? Should I drive or take the train? Many risks go unmeasured, unstructured, undocumented. People just make their decisions on how they feel or what they're used to. But in GRC, we have something called frameworks. Frameworks are basically guidelines that are standardized by a committee of very smart people. And they basically put these various standards together to basically help us make good judgment on a security program. Now, just to name a few, we have NIST 837, ISO 27001, 27002, CMMC, and FAIR. In this field, risks should not go undocumented, unstructured, and definitely not unquantified. Every major risk decision must have some logic behind it. And many of these go through a voting system, sometimes called CAB, or Change Advisory Board. This is where various department heads meet at a company and they vote on whether or not to make a major change that might bring some risk to the organization. As a cybersecurity analyst, though, it's very important to understand the entire scope of risk. This is why the CISSP exam is a very difficult exam. It's because organizations really want their analysts or the people that they hire to really understand risk, not only from a personal perspective, but from the perspective of a business. You see, poor decisions really affect everybody and could potentially affect the lives of millions. Let's talk about how you should understand risk from the perspective of a risk analyst. One of the first things you should learn working at a new organization is what is the risk appetite of your organization. If it's a small startup, it might be a little bit more aggressive with risk. They might have a larger risk appetite. But if you work for, let's say, a bank or a government, obviously the risk appetite is very low, where they don't want to take a lot of assumed risk. So when we work at an organization, we're going to use a type of risk framework to kind of help us guide where we want to be. Now, when we conduct risk assessments, we need some type of framework to rely on or to use as a guidance. For now, let's use NIST 837 Risk Management Framework as an example. Risk Management Framework has 6 steps. The first step, to me, by far, is the most important. And the first step is to be able to identify and categorize your assets. If you don't know where your assets are, how are you supposed to defend them? So, to me, step 1 is probably the most crucial. Step 2 is about tailoring the security controls for your organization. NIST 853 has more than 1,000 controls across 20 different distinct control families. So step 2 is about selecting the controls that apply or are within scope of your security plan. Step 3 is about implementing the controls. And by far, step 3 is probably the most time consuming and the most complex, because step 3 is all about getting the right tools in place, the right resources, and this takes time. It could take months, years. But think about all the tools out there that exist right now, like your SIMs, your firewalls. All of these things require money and require people, experts, to implement them and make sure that they're right, or to make sure that they're implemented correctly. Step 4 is to assess the controls that are in place. This is where we come in. Internally or externally, an organization can test the controls to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to. If there's a law or some sort of regulation that is required by the organization to meet, this is where we would assess to ensure that the controls in place are meeting those requirements. Before we continue to step 5, let's talk about risk types. Inherent risk is the risk that you would initially assume upon looking at any type of risk. Residual risk is the risk that is remaining or left over after a risk has been formally or properly assessed. Target risk is the risk where you want to be at the final state. Let me make a quick example. Say you're riding your bike and you fall down. The initial risk is to get up and look at your body and see what got damaged. If your leg is bleeding, the initial risk is that your leg has some type of injury. Now, it hurts a little bit more than what you think, so you go to a hospital. The hospital does an x-ray and they see that you have a very small fracture. So now the residual risk is not a minor scrape, but an actual more serious wound where your bone is actually fractured. So the target is that you want to be fully healed or obviously not wounded. That's your target. So that would be a good analogy as to understand how initial, residual, and target risk works. Step 5 is about executive leadership making a decision on the risks that we have detected. They can choose to do one of the following, or maybe multiple, depending. They can choose to accept risk, transfer the risk, mitigate the risk, avoid the risk, or escalate the risk. Once a decision has been made on what to do with the risk, the last step is to basically monitor the risk for any new changes that may occur. Right now, we live in a time where technology is radically changing and improving. So being able to monitor these changes and make sure that our organization is on top of it and making annual assessments, step 6 is very important, because we need to know if anything has been changed or updated, if there's a new law or a new regulation. This is where step 6 is very important. We need to be able to monitor this change and restart the cycle if something new has come into place. If you want to be a successful security analyst, you must really understand risk. And it's not just passing the CISSP exam, it's really understanding fundamentally the importance of risk. Now, I'm a person that doesn't really take huge risks in life or make decisions that might impact me very, very poorly financially or my health. So I think that plays a lot into the type of person that is behind a risk decision. And organizations that understand this, I think, do well in hiring people that understand that kind of risk and that responsibility. And for the people coming out of college or people who are transferring into cybersecurity, I want you guys to understand that we really need good risk analysts. We really need good security, because now that AI is coming out and becoming a little bit more complex, that complexity comes with a lot of bad energy, potentially, with the evolution of advanced social engineering, that it looks pretty scary. Especially with threats like deepfakes, right? Technology can only do so much to defend, but it's us, the humans, that ultimately have to make the right decisions. And every right decision makes our progress to become a better society each time. So keep that in mind, because to really be successful and to not just make your company make the right choices, if you want a better future and a better life for the younger generations, your decisions definitely make that change and that impact. And this is something that is really, really awesome about what we do here in cybersecurity. Well, that's it for today. I hope you found this content educational. Be sure to stick around for the CISSP question of the day. I'll catch you next time.
CISSP question of the day.